Hi everyone, good evening. We'll just wait for 2 more minutes and then begin. I think we'll just start and proceed from there as to how long we would like to engage with. Thank you all for being part of the course, and it has been a few days of you doing the course per se. What My name is Anusha. I am one of the course faculty, joined by Shreyasi, who is also anchoring the course along with me from TIS. And what we are excited to understand from you is how your own experiences of designing learning experiences in the English language classroom has been. A lot of the course actually tries to build on that. We also are trying to see how we can utilize and through these sessions talk about how we can use new technologies and new innovations to be able to design experiences. So while it may not be part of the course in terms of the write up or anything, the idea is also to try and see how can there be you know how can learning experiences be generated using new methods, new technologies, new tools that are available. So this webinar is really open in that sense, and the other sessions of online classes are open in the sense that you can ask your questions, your doubts, and we can proceed on from there. Just to introduce you in terms of where the course itself focuses on and what it does, is we do try and ensure that uh, there are 3 units in this session, and that those 3 units largely will deal with varied kinds of activities, honestly speaking. So let me share the screen and just show you a glimpse of the outline, basically, of the courses, so that you have a roadmap ahead. There is, of course, the course introduction, and it tells you what the course roadmap is in a way. I hope all of you have looked at it, because our pre-course survey is also right there. We generally start with something where we are looking at what the course activities, etc. would be, but the weightage is roughly divided into 30, 35, and 35%, primarily because there is implementation exercises that are in the unit 2 and 3. So you have 2 kinds of, assessment that we would be covering. This is a rough and tentative outline of what the kind of assessments are really. But we are assuming that the first 2 weeks we will be done with unit 1, and even in week 3 there will be unit 1. And there will be activities that you could be looking at. And unit 2 and unit 3 are generally considered to be a little shorter, but because you have built on some of these elements, you would be able to do them much better as the days goes on. So that's somewhere where we had kind of outlined and understood our, platform to be. And yeah, we have seen the fact that you could have introduced yourself and so on. So there are 3 units, as we said. Designing activities for the language classroom is the first part, where we're looking at grammar, we're looking at reading and writing. And we're trying to see how you could construct around the students activities that will enable them to engage, activities that will enable them to roll out and see how students can be engaged. So even if I'm showing a projector, is there something that I can do to enable the student to learn with more engagement? And while we think that videos are very engaging, they're not always engaging. It's when the student is, involved in doing something, that is when engagement comes in. So a video game is always more engaging than even a YouTube video that we see, because then I am doing something to that video game. Otherwise, I would like to just watch the video on YouTube to switch off, to kind of zone out and to kind of relax my mind and not let it engage, which is not what learning is about. Learning is about engaging, wanting to engage with materials, with learning experiences, with each other. And so a lot of the focus on the first aspects were on designing activities, looking at where these activities come in. Unit 2 has a lot on planning. So we do have a lesson plan that we're expecting at the end, where there is a planning, but it's not just planning. We would expect you to reflect on why and how does this create a learning experience. So let me give you an example. An example is of, and something that is very simple. Say if you had, this is an experiment given, this is a task given to you, and you have to draw lines across a page. So you have a page and you just have to draw lines across it, right? So I have this and I just have to draw lines. And I keep drawing lines across the page, and I keep drawing them and I keep drawing them. And this is what you have been told that you should continue doing. Now, that sounds like a boring task. It seems like there is no learning involved. But if I am in an arts class, generally this is one of the activities given in, say, JJ School of Arts. This is an activity given where a person is given this large piece of canvas, A3 size or sometimes even A2 size. And they are told that you have to fill the page with horizontal lines. You have to fill the page with diagonal lines. You have to fill the page with diagonal lines that go that are perpendicular from the left onwards. There are diagonal lines which are from the right onwards. So you have to just draw lines in these manner. There are also vertical lines, okay? And you have to fill pages after pages. And then there's a student who is like, but what am I doing with this kind of a monotonous, routinized activity? And what do you think? Why do you think an art student who goes into an art school thinking that they will learn to explore their imagination and put on canvas everything that their brain can imagine, and the first task that they're given is draw lines and fill a large piece of paper with lines, what do you think is the learning? You can type, you can unmute yourself, you can chat. Iram, are you trying to speak? If you are, then we can't hear you. Okay, you can see. Okay, no, all right. The very activity of such kinds, and if someone is typing, would like to see, but okay. Very activity that comes in such kinds of spaces is how we engage uh, with two things. As a student, I needed to draw across the page. And as I'm drawing across the page, I get a sense of the page. As I draw across the page, I get a sense of the pencil or the brush or the charcoal piece that I'm holding. I get a sense of how much of strength is required. I get a sense of the fluidity of the movement. I get a sense of doing something repeatedly. But I also get a sense, and there is a saying, yes, I have some chat. So how the spacing is between the lines, true, Iram, maybe that routine activity for the learner, but the first step that the students need to master, true. And teachers want to see how straight the lines are. Well, not true. Uh, the point is not about whether you are drawing straight lines. The point is about how are you able to, over a period of time, and you can try this activity at home as well, but how over a period of time do your lines become automatically better and firmer and straighter and fluid, more than straight, fluid and connect. And yes, they are, but it is also the fact, Mansi says increase control and observe what happens when drawing the lines. True, very true. It is about the fact that once I am in a brainless activity, my mind starts working a lot. When you're very engaged uh, and you're not bored at all, your brain is not going to work. There are times when you can go to very creative people and ask them what they do. They will say we meditate, or they will say we in a very routine task, we do very routine tasks, we go and exercise, we go and cook, or we clean cars, or we do something which is something where their brain is not always fully active. Because when you're engaged in very monotonous, routinized tasks, the creativity emerges. And yes, these are kinds of ways that you can help to improve on learning, on creativity, and actually draws up your creativity. So on one hand, you're building up the skill set of the student to draw lines, to control the pencil, to see how much force it takes, to see how much movement is possible. All of that, yes. It also enables the student to improve their skill in drawing straight lines and spacing them better. True. But it also does one more thing. It gets the student to understand the canvas better. It gets the student to understand the material better. It gets the student to feel and flavor of what that material is. So it opens up their imagination, that material becomes almost a part of them, that they are now able to imagine and think of how they can work with this material, because it's something that they have used so often. So that canvas space, when they are drawing and figuring it out, becomes the kind of space that they are now imagining. And further on, as they keep doing this, because they don't always have to think, it is monetized, they are now imagining what else the shapes can lead to. They are seeing what else can I do with it. And they are in a way becoming more creative, simply because it is more boring. And boredom is one of the activities of creativity. And so if you can't be bored ever, um, you won't be creative ever. You know, that's one of the things. There is this book that talks about the fact that good is the, is one of the sayings is that good is what kills greatness. And the reason why is, if you are good, you will be happy with that goodness, and you will be satisfied, and you won't search for something better. And that searching for something better only comes when you face something bad and traumatic in that sense. So classrooms, and why I spoke about this in planning and designing language lessons, is that classrooms don't always have to be joyful every single moment. Classrooms also need at times to get students to be disciplined. Classrooms at times need students to get to be monotonous, do monotonous, routinized activities. Classrooms need to give them the sense of working their way through certain repeat actions, because then they will suddenly work with that pattern. There is another thing that this activity I spoke about does. It helps you recognize and engage with patterns. You do this even in stitching. Whenever we learn stitching, and those who have learned stitching the first time would know this, you are told to stitch in patterns. You will get one cross stitch, you will learn how to do it in an angle, you will learn how to do stars, and there are these rows that you will learn of patterns. And the reason for those patterns is those patterns become building blocks for everything else that you will do as a creative level. And somewhere language has to also get students to understand what those patterns and how those patterns develop. So every activity does not have to be this joyous, joyful things, but it is designing those learning experiences to see how it is a building block for a later activity. That doesn't mean that we bore them out of their minds, but we do find that in this urge and craving for joyfulness, we forget that there is joy in engaging, and there is joy in doing routinized activities as well. Not maybe during, but sometime later, when you sense that you have improved, or you sense that you have learned, or you sense that you have created, there is the joy. So the notion of what joyful learning is, the notion of what experiencing learning is, has to be also kind of orchestrated. And this was one of the points that we were making. And we can make such routinized activities also very meaningful and joyful, but they are part and parcel. So everything cannot be elements. And therefore, we had these other elements that we have in Unit 3, where we talk about lesson assessment, task-based assessments, and how can this all be worked into assessments? Because at the end of the day, somewhere, we have to work with assessment per se. And the point in terms of improving learning, and while we were saying, developed in freeze control, observe what happens while drawing lines, etc., that you were talking about, also comes from language learning experiences. So when a student is learning a language, and we have these experiences, right? We ask students to introduce themselves, for instance. And can we play that? I mean, if you play that game at some point, you could just introduce yourself. And I say, I'm Anusha. I work in Tata Institute of Social Sciences. I work with English language teaching. I anchor TPD, Teacher Professional Development at my center. I like reading. I like eating junk food. And then I pause and then I stop. And then someone says, can you introduce yourself again? And then I have to think, what is it that I have said? And I have to again introduce myself. So now I'm thinking maybe I should say, I'm Anusha. I have traveled much of this country. Uh, I love teaching. That is my vocation and my avocation. Um, and then I have to think again about what else I have to say about me. Now, we ask students when through these kinds of activities, when they're repeating tasks, we do ask them to also engage with the idea of themselves and their self-discovery and their own ways of understanding themselves and getting into the realm and the depth of it. And one of my favorite activities is really that lesson that we used to, I mean, the task that we used to have as an exercise that teachers gave us, which was my summer vacation homework. And at least nowadays, some kids have very exciting vacations. I had extremely boring vacations. I had vacations where we would go to the same place, meet the same people, travel in the same train, most probably also again meet the same people because I had this family who used to also travel and we were only train friends, long distance train friends. We would meet every year and she and I would exchange comic books. But that was like for 4 years when we were in that one city and then we went to another city. So it was fun, fantastic, but it was my summer vacation every single homework. And it's boring because how much do you describe of your summer vacation where you're going to the same place, same, yeah, the summer tasks are the essays. But how much do we describe? Because my nanny would make the same food. It's not that she was going to make different kinds of, it was not like we were going to have Italian one day and Chinese another day, and I could explore Hawaiian food another day. No, I was going to have South Indian meals and maybe one or two exotic dishes that my mom would not make, but otherwise it would just be that. So what could I say? And how many times could I describe mangoes that I could eat in summer, which all of us described anyway. So it is such a boring task. What is it? It's a repetition task. But at the same time, the first standard child, the second standard child, and the third standard child uh, improves. And it is a wonderful journey. I don't know if any of you had parents like mine. My mother kept my essays. And so if you study the journey of what I wrote in first standard and second standard and third standard and fourth standard and fifth standard, I had the same homework of my summer vacation across these. A, my sentences had improved. B, I also noticed another thing, and you will find that repeat tasks do this, is that um, students observe different things. And and we all, as we are growing up, start observing that I went on a walk. Suddenly that became exciting. A dog became a focal point of my summer vacation, being frightened of the dog and being barked at. And so that became a focal point. Another point was when I suddenly had someone say that there is a dance class down the street and begging and cajoling my grandmother to take me along. So different points and different activities became my summer vacation. So my summer vacation seemed the same dull, dreary thing. In the essays, when you went back, it seemed very different. And those are activities. So then why am I talking about this? I'm talking about this because we also now have started doing this in creative writing with students. As I pointed out this exercise of drawing straight lines, We do the same thing in terms of experiences with the students in writing. So we tell them, earlier we used to always have this journal writing where we would have diary writing that we would make them do. Uh, in this case, we told students, and we have done this with all grades from first standard to 10th standard to college and beyond. We have asked them to take one object that they can see every day. It could be a chair, it could be a marker, it could be a pen, it could be a pencil, it could be a book, it could be anything. They have to take that one object and they have to write every day on that object for 30 days. So that's the task. The task is that you have to write on the chair, the fan, the tube light, anything. You take one object. You decide that object. It could be the coffee mug. And you decide this object and you have to write on it for 30 days. And you have to write at least 5 sentences. So we also plan it. First standard, we will say you have to write 2 sentences. Second, third, and all, we say 5, 7 sentences, up to 10 sentences. Fifth, seventh, we tell them, you have to write about 100 words, 200 words. Every day you have to write on this object. Can you imagine on day 10, how bored you would be of that fan that you were writing, to write about it. Yeah. Is it, as Sadia says, that the students feel very enthusiastic because it's like a co-curricular activity without any assessment, marks, or grade? I was not very enthusiastic about writing about my summer vacation. Let me tell you, I felt like it was, I felt anyway that summer vacation was like a punishment because there were more aunties and uncles and grandparents shouting at me. And I had to remember all of that and not really write it in my book. So yeah, but yes, it can be fun. It is fun at times when you try and revise it and use some fancy words that we remembered to use. But this is an activity that I was talking about, of writing on the same object. We made them do this in repeat cycles. And then they had to maybe, sometimes we just told them, okay, you have to write about 10, 15 points about it. If the time is very crunched up, say in 8th and 9th standard, we would not make them do 300 words, but we would still say you have to write every day 50 to 100 words. And they had to write. So now they're writing. First day, I will describe it. Second day, I will describe it in a different way. Third day, I will say what is the purpose. Fourth day, I will say how I like it. Fifth day, I'll say how others dislike it. The seventh day, I'll say how I have now started disliking it. Eighth day, I have to still think what will I write about this. So I will say, what else could it be made of? Ninth day, I will say, what else is it associated with? 10th day, I'm still stuck. Now I have to figure out what do I write about it. Do I just repeat myself? I can't. I've been told that I should not repeat myself too much. You can have the same idea, but you need to state it differently. You can't repeat. So now I have to think about it. And then it's wonderful because students are so perplexed in the 10th, 11th, 12th day. They are like, kya likhe iske bare mein? And then comes metaphors, then comes imagination, then comes not on day 14, not on day 17, but by 21 and 22, when they stick with it, then comes the creativity, because now they are imagining it in different places. They go and say, if this pen had been in, if Aurangzeb had this pen, that was one of the exercises that one of the students did. He said, if Aurangzeb had this pen, what would he have written? And that is the, that was the letter that he wrote. So the pen is saying that because he had taken up the pen. And because on day 22, he was like, kuch to karu. I'll write something that is interesting. And then that was when he started writing. Yes. But for that power of imagination to kick in, it required that boredom of almost 7, 8, 10 days that these students had, where they were struggling, to write. Now, what is the learning that comes from such kinds of activities? And this is an activity I've talked of, sustained activity. The learning that comes from is, there is a, I don't know if you've heard of Carol Dweck, but Carol Dweck is a person who, uh, is someone who writes on the growth mindset. And she has a lot of TED Talks. And yes, so uh, that is my favorite person to go to, because the growth mindset is really something that all of us should believe in. But one of the things that we have in a lot of studies that have emerged around Carol Dweck's mindset is studies that have found that, for instance, girls who are very good in math, and this is a study done in America on good performing students. So traditionally, girls till grade 6 are far outperform boys. Grade 5 to grade 6, depends on which country you're looking at as statistics, but they outperform boys till puberty hits largely. So again, there towards the end, they found with the girls who were very good, they tried giving them problems that were difficult to solve, math problems. This was in math class. And they did that with boys as well. I mean, the students got that problem. And what they found across many schools, across thousands of students, is that girls who were very good with math, who were getting very good scores with math, let me put it that way, were getting very good scores with math, tended to give up on the problem more quickly than the boys who were good at math or got good scores in math. And that was surprising till they did a longitudinal study. And they did a longitudinal study with a more select base. Now, many of these students got into computer science, one of the more highly renowned and coveted streams in a sense. And you would say that they're the cream of the cream, right? The cream de la cream students then were studied. And there is one study that is being published also on this, but that I have read. But those students would come into the computer science teacher's lab, and if they had a problem that they couldn't solve, the girls would invariably say, something is wrong with me, I'm not able to solve the problem. And the boys would come back and say, something is wrong with the problem, it is not solvable. Now that seems a very simple thing, but one is blaming oneself and the other is looking at the problem as the problem, source of problem. And in the first one, when she says, there's something wrong with this, I'm not able to solve it, is saying that I'm the problem. They have identified and sympathized and empathized with the problem such that they have become the problem themselves. And something that Carol Dweck talks about in the growth mindset is that this is a problem with getting good grades or good marks or good things, is that they start fearing failure. And they start fearing that if they don't do well in a particular period of time, that they most likely are going to give up on the course, on the career, on the lifestyle. They're going to make compromises and just say, okay, I can't do this. So how do we build in the child a growth mindset? How do we build in the child an ability to transcend that period when they are at a loss, when they are feeling like a failure, when they don't know what to do, is enable them to give tasks, enable them to work with processes where they will face these kinds of setbacks and work through them and praise them for working through them. So at the end of the 30-day task of journaling is not about, did you write well, but did you do the task every day? And if you did the task every day, wonderful, you have won it. If you've not done the task every day, not good. And just by enabling them to stick on with the task is enabling them to go through that 11th to 10th to 17th day, 11th to 20th day, whatever mindset, to get them to explore. And then they see what their perseverance can lead them to. So the idea of this course of designing learning experiences, while a lot of the course is really centered on that 1 day activity or the 2 day activity, I would encourage y'all to think about this larger terrain of where you could, lead students towards, because NEP 2020 talks about holistic learning outcomes and so on. And it is encouraging to see how we can build in them a growth mindset through activities such as a 30-day task, and actually even designing boredom into the curriculum. I mean, I would almost argue for designing boredom into the curriculum. Boredom needs to be a key part of some part of our lesson plan. And some part of it is joyful. If every time and every day is joyful, and there is no space for reflection, one of the best doodles, all of us have done this. Some of our best doodles are during those horrible meetings. Some of our best ideas for stories are during those very boring lectures. Some of our best translations of songs, at least mine, have been at the back bench of an economics lecture in college. Backstreet Boys is coming to India, and they have translated every song, but not when they were very engaged in the economics class, but otherwise. And yes, so that kind of feeling of engagement comes in. That doesn't mean every class should be boring, but there is scope for it. I think there is a lot of pressure on us to always build very exciting activities all the time. And there is a lot of research that has been done, which talks about the fact that if we want to build creativity, we need to give them free time. We need to give them free mind space. When we say free time and space, it is mind space, which means that there must be a time when they can, think. And when will they think? When they are excited? No. When they are watching a film and we are very, very engaged with it, we have no time to think about anything else. We come out of the hall without having thought of it. We have been immersed in that experience. When will I think? I will think when I come back, when I'm lying down on bed doing nothing. And then I will think about the movie. Then I will think about the lesson. Then I will think about the acting. If I'm always immersed in watching that movie and I go from one movie to the next movie to the third movie, I'm not really going to reflect. I'm not going to think, and I'm not going to create. And that's the danger of YouTube, because it's not giving us time to think before we move to the next one. But that was a beauty of Doordarshan, because it gave us a lot of time to think. And so that's something that we can create. Yeah. So if anyone else, I'm going to pause here. I've spoken a lot. If anyone wants to come in and speak, and thanks for all the typing in that has been happening, Sadia and others, Lavanya, etc. But yeah, yeah, thank you for saying that. I'm glad that you found some new activities, etc. There's a lot available. Sometimes I feel that, now the competition for us is sometimes ChatGPT, because it can give you more ideas. But ultimately, it is also about how we explore and explain and customize it for our students. So great. So if anyone else wants to come in and have questions, comments on what we just discussed, that would be great.
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, sure. Hi.
Yeah, hello. My name is Idam.
Yeah,
I'm really curious about this thing of introducing boredom while designing these classes. I just wanted to ask, for example, if I'm kind of designing say 10 classes, so like how many classes of boredom should be there, 2 or 3 in between the interesting ones?
It's
I mean,
not a,
just
it is,
asking.
yeah, it is a good question, and it's not a hard and fast rule, but it is the fact that, um, the if you notice younger class, and also what we consider boredom, whether the child will consider it boring, that's also very important. I'll give you one example of that. You know, if you notice children, they walk, you tell a child that, you know, you touch this wall and then you go and touch that wall and then you come back. You touch this wall and then go back and run and touch that wall. And a small child, a 2-year-old child, has great fun doing that repetitive activity. Brilliant. I mean, they are amused. We have all seen children when they are going up and down the stairs. And there's, you know, while we go up and down the stairs, there's a child who is going, you know, climbs one step up, climbs one step down. And so, you know, and then you come back after 15 minutes, and then the child is still climbing one step up and down that. Well, older parents do tell us that, you know, what are you doing? You're sitting and typing the same nonsense again and again, perhaps. But those children have fun. They don't find it repetitive. They find it very imaginative. So we have to build boredom that they find boring. But going back to your question of what is a frequency? Uh, there's no fixed rule. It really depends on your ability. But I was more talking about it in a sense that the pressure on us to create these exciting activities always is actually a false pressure, and it's a negative. It's not even required, because in order to learn what is good, I also need to know what is bad, and therefore the boring activities. So an exciting class, if you have to ask me, let me reverse it the other way. How many boring classes? Instead of that, how many exciting classes? So the trigger is generally, in a sense, if you're looking at a child, twice a week, once a week, twice a week, that you have that exotic. Let me ask you this question in another way. All of us have an answer for this. How many times a week would you want a child to have something exotic on their plate? You know, we generally have your dal khichdi, sabzi, kari, chawal, whatever. How many times in a week do you want them to have this newness in their plate? Every day, every meal, or maybe once a week, twice a week? Correct. You got your answer. That's the answer for your exciting. Yes. Sorry, Yogita and others have also been writing. Sorry, Ram. Yeah, you were saying something. I'm sorry, cut you off.
No, thank you so much. I got it actually. You know, in fact, how you said it, that we have that pressure of designing exciting classes. So maybe I got under that pressure of designing, boring classes instead of letting it just be, maybe giving a break from all the excitement and also taking a break from designing those exciting classes. That way.
It is one of the things that so you have to understand, for a child, it is, and the younger the children are, it is, they're very highly stimulated. So their brain is fizzing with a lot of electrical impulses. And if you give them, one of the reasons why children in nursery are sent for only 3 hours a day is because even that much of learning is really a lot for the child, because the child will go back home and still learn. They're still working on it. In their heads, they are. And that's a lot of impulse, and there's a lot of electricity impulse. So think about if you have to watch films, 6 films a day. It's not that it's not possible to watch 6 films a day, but at the end of the day, how much ever you love films, you will get a headache. And how much ever you love films, you would have lost some of the joy of the film, joy of that discovery, joy of that immersion. You would have lost it because it is so exciting and it is so stimulating that your eyes, your brain, you're tired, you're physiologically tired at the end of the day, not just psychologically and mentally, but physiologically tired at the end of the day. You have a headache at the end of the day. That comes in from there. So there is, yes, Lavanya, you're right. Maintain novelty is an important ingredient. And joyful learning, and this is the point in this, the joyful learning is an activity where you may want to engage and sustain and you want to build in them the capacity to sustain themselves through an activity. you don't need to just make it. So every time that a child does not get engaged in an activity, very often now the current discourse seems to be that acha activity acha nahi, or the teacher is not engaging enough, and the teacher is not creative enough. But honestly, when they get into a workplace, and we are supposed to also skill them for the workplace. So there's the Skill India movement, and then there is this other movement. And we are supposed to skill them for the workplace. Is the workplace going to be so exciting? I mean, we all are working. Is our workplace this exciting? Our workplace has such boring tasks for us to do repetitively. In fact, more boring tasks than exciting tasks. And if that is the case, we need to get them to have the ability to sustain themselves. So designing learning experiences will have to take into account that part of how can I make them sustain themselves. One way of doing this is to make learning visible, right? So why we do the 30-day journal activity, I'm giving that as an example, but the 30-day journal activity is right in their hands for them to see what they are doing over 30 days. You can do this with listening and speaking as well, right? I told you about introductions, or you can talk about descriptions. So describe a pizza that you ate in 1 minute. Stop. Now describe it again. Stop. Now describe it again. So the third time that they do it, they sometimes have forgotten a very good point that they spoke the first time, but they are much more fluent, they are much more clear, they've got their words better, but they may have lost a couple of interesting points that they spoke the first and second time, because in that flow that did not come through, or a particular phrase that they used wo miss ho gaya. So they also realize what happens when you're practicing, and how you need to be conscious when you're practicing, when you are repeating. You need to be conscious when repeating. Repeating is not just a routinized task. The problem that we all have with repetition is we all think about repetition the way we were doing dictation. Write this word 5 times a day. But repetition tasks like these, like I was speaking about as speaking, is actually a very important task of any drama theater artist that you can talk to. They will all tell you that they wrote and they rehearsed the dialogues 1,500 times. Any audio artist will tell you that they read the same dialogues in 7-8 times and 7-8 ways sometimes to look at it. So yes, they will express more confidently, more fluidly. But if we can show them those activities where there is repetition, so they speak the same poem 5 times, 7 times, 8 times, also same lines 8 times, but we ask them to do it in different ways. So we ask them, okay, now stop. We make the stops different. We pause it differently. So they're doing repetition, but we bring in a variety in that repetition. It will still not be as boring. It is still frustrating. It may not be as boring, but it's frustrating, but now I have to do this because my teacher is really forcing me to do this. And at the end, I ask them, so how did you feel? How did you, were you more fluent? Were you getting the words much more quickly the third time round? Did you do this activity better? And this can also be done in pair activities, right? I could have 2 pairs say, okay, you make that person speak this about 3 times, and then you describe your favorite dish 3 times. And they have to stop and pause the student and make them do just that much as an activity where I don't have to do anything, but just see whether everyone is engaged in that task will still get them to speak fluently and repeatedly. So there could be that. It does feel boring, but there is a purpose of that learning outcome that is coming through. Second part of it is I also get them to see, did I persevere? Did I engage with the task even though I felt it was worthless? Because that's a very important skill and a learning outcome for them to come in with. Did I persevere? Did I still sit with a book because I didn't know what to write, but did I still sit with the book, or did I just give up in the first 5 minutes? If you did not give up in the first 5 minutes, kudos. You tried writing something. It was not very long, but you tried putting down words. Maybe they were, instead of 50 words, only 7 words, but you wrote 7 words and you sat for that length of time to try and see if you could think of something else. And then you came back to it the next day. Kudos. You have got a life skill, not just English skill, but a life skill. And over the period of time, because you got the life skill, your English communication will also improve, your creativity will improve, your so many other aspects will improve. So that could be a visible activity, because that summer vacation thing is actually a task which is asking students to improve their observation skills, assuming that as students cognitively develop, that it will be expressed creatively in their, how they describe, that the length of sentences will change, that the vocabulary used will change, that my very sense of perception will be different as I grow older. It is expected that all of this will happen, but very rarely do we as children, as students, realize this about our summer vacation essay uh, as a task, and realize how we have grown. But a 30-day task or a 20-day task can get them to do it. So yeah, practice. For instance, we don't deny practice or routines in dance, in sports, right? In sports, we talk of routines as an activity. They have to do the same sets of exercises all the time. And that is a great thing in sports and dance or music. But somehow because we have so been against a drill-based activity, and I'm still against a very drill-based activity in a classroom, but we seem to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater. We need to understand that routines have their own charm and their own purpose of learning. And we need to use it judiciously and not be so fixated. So dal chawal most of the days, and then twice a week, you give them that exotic burger, pizza, great. I think that would be also putting less pressure on us, but also to get them to see how they are themselves adapting. We have to teach them adaptability. This is adaptability in the classroom. They have to learn how to be adaptable and engaged in a boring, so-called boring class, and engaged and focused in a so-called exciting class. So yeah, I think those will help. And I think we put a lot of pressure in ourselves, definitely, to make that. Yeah, are there any other questions? I mean, that was one of the reasons I started off with this, is that you will be doing your lesson planning. And I wanted to also tell you that as long as you have a reason and a purpose for a particular lesson design, this is a lesson learning experience as well. And the course itself is focused as designing learning experiences. And so we would like you all to think about, what is the learning experience I want to give this child? Maybe I want to give, and the threshold can be that I want to make the child bored, literally bored out of their mind. The threshold can be that I want to blow their minds out of, and make them as excited as possible. But what's the learning experience I really want to give them? For what purpose do I want to give them? So it could be that I'm making them really bored. A simple exercise could be where, and this is something that we do in discourse analysis at higher grade level, at MA English. We give a student the same text. It's a text of, a one page, typed page, so maybe 500, 600 words. So 500, 600 words, we give it to them. And then we tell them, okay, now analyze it. So you analyze that as a task. So you analyze. So what will you analyze? You will analyze point of view. You will analyze setting. You will analyze, tone, tonality, and the sequence of actions, characterization. Fine, great. Now we give them the same paper. We tell them analyze. But now you can't repeat everything that you said. They're looking at it and saying, now what do I do? Suddenly now they start noticing vocabulary. They start noticing, parsing. They start noticing sentence structure, which they did not notice the first time round, because grammar did not occur to them the first time round. What occurred to them was, characterization and all these wonderful things. We give it to them the third time. We say, now again do it. They are looking and saying, what do I do with the 600? It's almost like by heart in your head, right? So it's 600 words. So now what do I do? Then they look at performative. Is it performative? Is it expressive? Is it declarative? what kind of sentence, what kind of purposes is this doing? How is it being presented? How is the idea kind of flowing? And it's wonderful to see that you don't have to do anything, but just give it to them and say, I'm not going to teach you anything. I'm just going to stand here and wait for you to discover. And yes, I can't do this in a first and second standard class, because obviously I would have had to have given them enough toolkits for them to have been able to do this. But I can do this in my MA class. And I could do this in my MA class because the students had some tools that were given prior. Now, if I did this in my MA class with vernacular medium students who are coming to English for the first time, I have to model that for them 1 or 2 times. Then give it. So you will also have to see whether it works in your classroom setting. As I said, something cannot be so challenging that it just baffles your mind. Something cannot be so boring that, and something that may be boring. So for instance, letters, right? Lettering, what we talk about is lettering. We do this with first standard children, even the junior KG children, where we are telling them to write multiple times. We have these wonderful handwriting books where you will write A, B, 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 B. It's very interesting that when you get to design school, that's the same exercise they make you do, right? They make you do that A, B, 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 C, 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 and make you do A's in different formats, because then you will learn how to do logo design, because that's the first activity of connecting you to logo design, brand building. Think about letters in a different way. So the first thing they make you do is make you bored out of your mind by making you draw letters. Wonderful. Is that the purpose of my language classroom, however? No. So I also have to think whether I need to bore them out of their mind for lettering in my language classroom in 8th, 9th standard if I don't want to teach them graphic design. If that is not my purpose, then I don't need to bore them out of their mind for that. Maybe I need to bore them out of their mind for vocabulary. I can tell them find different words in this or different patterns in this and do that, because maybe vocabulary building is my exercise, and I can bore them out of their mind with that kind of detective work, that I could tell them find all. And this is an activity that one of the teachers that I was we were working with did, and she said, in the textbook, in your textbook, in these 2 chapters, find all the words that end with ness. Find all the words, and then the next time round she made them say, write down all the words that could end with ness, but do not in this chapter end with ness, NESS, and then find it. It is a kind of boring activity, but it is an activity that enables them to now look at morphology as a pattern and build on that as a skill set. Did she do that activity all the time with IVE and with TY and LY and all of it? No, she just did it once. So you find different activities that might seem boring, but you kind of mix them up, because there is pressure from everyone to be a little bit more interesting. So we can again make all of this happen. So these were exercises that the students themselves understood how morphology kind of works, because while they were doing NESS, they also now suddenly started realizing, acha, these words only end with ly, or these words are more like adverbs. And when they started looking at it, automatically the conversation in those 3 days that she was making them do this as a side activity, the conversation in the classroom over lunchtime was, this word, when they were speaking, this word does not have an NESS. This can't be a noun. This word is an adverb only. And it was interesting to see how just by making them look at not nouns and adverbs and just talk about NESS as a morpheme that had to be added, and looking at that morphology, she had change the discourse of that class in a way. So these could be elements that help. And yeah, I think I have given enough boring activity ideas now for today. So yeah, but that's also important, I think, designing learning experiences. We have given you a lot of interesting activities in the course. So yeah, any other questions, points?
Good evening, ma'am.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah. So the main thing which I feel is about the grammar,
Mhm.
where the parents always, they always say that we have to make them learn the rules rather than help them understand. But in fact, the way we teach them is make them understand and then try to come to the rules. So more often than not, it is about that we learn grammar by hearing people talk. And what happens to sound good is grammatically correct for us. So, it really is very difficult to make them understand that it is more about functional grammar than structural grammar now. So, how do we deal with such queries, ma'am?
Um, One element, this is parental communication more than what we'll do with students, but one of the elements that I think you will have to start off with is mm, by asking them if advertisements are always grammatically correct, if songs are always grammatically correct. Because communication is not about being grammatically correct. There are top head honchos uh, who don't speak grammatically correct language. It may be Hindi, it may be English, it may be Tamil, it may be anything. So that's one point. I mean, to tell them about how communication comes in and ask them about, what is effective communication? Is it a grammatically correct sentence which is in a letter that the bank gives? I mean, what do they read more? Do they read the bank letter more, which is very grammatically correct English largely, or the advertisement more, which is largely incorrect grammar most of the time? And I think that helps in trying to tell them why communication skills are important and not grammar per se. Knowing how to get your message across is important and not grammar per se. The second part of it is to get them to understand how language evolves and talk about mother tongue. So the reason why mother tongues and most of our native tongues may not be mother tongue, maybe whatever language that we were exposed to, maybe because of a caretaker, maybe because of our parents. Um, we spoke that language because we were exposed to it. We heard it a lot. We then started recognizing a lot of patterns in our brain. There is a video, a TED Talk video by Patricia Kuhl, Kuhl. She does this brain imaging resonance of bilingual children. And what you find between bilingual children and monolingual children is that bilingual children have a larger repertoire of patterns of language. And any child, many children, will understand patterns in language and they will know something is instinctively wrong. For instance, you will not generally find students of uh, anyone saying we will find maybe people saying I eat apple, I apple eat, all of that. We rarely find people saying apple I eat, or we even rarer apple eat I. You will not find apple eat I in languages across, right? Because there is a pattern that they have observed. The observation is that in my language, maybe it is SVO. In another language, maybe it is SOV. In another language, maybe it is OV, OSV, maybe, but it is very rare. And in almost no language is it OVRS as an object, verb, subject. So apple, eat, I. No. So they have not made that mistake. So that means somewhere at the back of the mind, the child and the others are learning the patterns of language and being able to accommodate it. So what helps them learn that language? It is only through reading or through hearing and listening. And so if they are not able to be given a lot of exposure to language, they're not able to listen to language, how will they be able to speak the language? Just giving them grammar rules is not going to be helpful enough. This is not mathematics. Language is at some point, it is both a psychological, a cognitive load function, and it is also got to deal with patterns. This is also something that has to be explained by saying that it is also deductive learning, where I listen to a lot of language and I deduce for myself the rules, right? I don't necessarily, I kind of understand the rules in terms of it through my own detective skills. And I will then transfer it into another language. And you can find this across children. So if you can make them fluent, and if you can get them to, absorb a lot of language, if parents come and ask, for instance, these aspects, we tell them, so how did you learn your first language? Did you learn it formally? No. Do you think you make mistakes in the language that you did learn formally? Yes, all of us make mistakes at some point or the other. But how did you learn then the first language? There also you make mistakes. How did you learn that? You learned it only through exposure. You learned it through practice and fluency. You learned it through negotiation. You learned the patterns before you learned you deduced the patterns before you learned that there was structure in language. And that's an important aspect and attribute to be talking to parents about. The moment many parents say that we are not, we have to give our children, we have to teach them grammar. The question is, can you also then, we'll teach grammar, no worries, we will do it, because challenging that we won't teach grammar does not make any sense in a school setup. I have found that that does not help. We tell them, yes, we'll teach grammar, but in your home, can you get more of this language audio for these people? Can you enable them to listen more to English? And not necessarily only BBC English, because anyway, BBC English is also all world English, but can you get them to listen to more patterns, more sounds, more systems? And here we will teach you grammar. And we can do the grammar with them by asking them something else. Like for instance, we did grammar where you can teach them points of view. And you ask them a question on pronouns, but now you teach them points of view. And you say, how do you know this is, whose point of view is it? And they say he is mentioned. So who is the he? Sharat is mentioned. Okay, Sharat's point of view. How do you know it's Sharat's point of view? Because he is speaking all the time. Okay, why can't it be, say, Raman's point of view? And then they will say, but whenever Raman is mentioned, Sharat is speaking about him. So through that kind of meaning-making questions, you have still got them to focus on grammar. So there could be those kinds of activities where meaning making is focused upon, but now you do it through grammar. It could be through tenses, it could be through others. The one that is very difficult is prepositions. There is nothing around that. But what can be really fun is one of my favorite activities is spot the difference. When you have two pictures where you have to spot the difference, and they are such rich resources if we can find the right pictures to teach vocabulary, to teach grammar articles. Because if you tell them to create in sentences, it's vocabulary because you have to find the vocabulary for the word, which is whatever is different. It is also something that they have to structure it. The picture on the left is different from the picture on the right. Not a picture on the left is different from a picture on the right, but the picture on the left is different from the picture on the right. The automatically comes to them. There is a plate on the table. And then you're asking them, so why did you say a picture on the table? Isn't there one table only? And they're looking at you, and then they find and they think, and then they are trying to find, and they come up with reasons and articulation at times. So just that one activity sometimes is this rich plethora of enabling them to think about and practice language, where you can get them to think about language in between. So I don't know whether I really answered all parts of your question, but this was my answer.
Yes, ma'am, it's really a huge topic. At least, like some of the examples which you gave, were really helpful in me putting across my views. Thank you.
Okay. All right. So thank you. I think these are great questions to really ask and have in a sense, because they really excite. I mean, we always are concerned, about language and how language will work. And we're always stressed about making very good, great activities. And I wanted to say, you can ease the pressure off as long as you have a purpose in mind. There are times when I have created these, as I pointed out, I'm very fond of these kinds of activities where they have to constantly find patterns. And sometimes the students find it boring. I just tell them use different colors to make it less boring for yourself. Let's see how you can make it less boring for yourself. So we ask them how you will solve the problem of making it less boring for yourself. And that becomes a problem solving activity because you're bored, but you have to engage. Now, how will you make it more interesting for yourself? Find ways and solutions. So it's a thematic where they have to engage deeply with the structure. Structure is generally boring. So grammar, those kinds of things are generally, children seem to find it boring to engage with. And then we tell them how can you engage. Maybe you use different color markers, different things, and how will you, or maybe make it a competition. So some students have told us we'll make it a competition. We're like, okay, fine, doing that. But that's problem solving. So there's another outcome that I've automatically identified in my classroom for that activity, which is problem solving. The problem was that the teacher created a very boring activity. The solution was something that the students had to find to make it less boring for themselves. Great. I'm happy with it. It's less work for me as well. So I'll deal with that. So those are, but that's I think that's something that we have to consciously plan. And that's what this course is also trying to give us, is that we have to consciously plan this. It can't just be, I just did it and okay, I will retrospectively fit all the learning outcomes. No, I need to be a bit more conscious about it if I want to say design learning experiences. So yes, thank you. Arpita and others, thank you for all of you all joining in. We did say it is 1 hour and I have exceeded the time. So for today, we will bid adieu and meet you again maybe 2 weeks later. Yes. If there are questions, do share with us on the discussion forum. We will definitely get back on that. And writing. For today, good evening. Thank you. Goodbye. I think the boredom part was ahead. Okay. Thank you all. Good evening and yeah.